So it is 6:02. I'm going to call the WSESD board meeting to order. The meeting of the WSESD will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment in a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during
Are you speaking, Kelly?
Yes, I am.
I think the thing is muted.
It's unmuted now.
Okay, so welcome to the meeting. I called the meeting to order at 6:02, and I will read the statement again to make sure that everyone has it. The meeting of the WSESD will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has a technical difficulty accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. So the first thing that I will do is I will add, I've been told that we have a retirement that I need to add to the administrative report. And I have been asked to have an executive session, which we will have at the end of the meeting. And I can't remember if there was anything.
And then individually signing the documents.
Okay, and we do have two documents that all the board members do need to make sure they sign, so we'll make sure we'll have to get that around to everybody. Possibly everyone has signed except me, so okay, thank you. And anyone who has not signed them, any board members, you will need to arrange to go down and see Mo to get them signed. So
By the 31st.
By the 31st, thank you. So the first thing is chair remarks. I just have a couple things that I need to address. At the last meeting, there was a discussion about the board expenses listed in the proposed budget for the upcoming school year. The word begrudge was used specifically in relation to the question of whether the board was in need of further administrative support. According to the dictionary, begrudge is a verb defined as to give reluctantly or resentfully. I do not believe that begrudge applies to any of the board members currently working to serve the needs of the school community. It has been said before, and I will do so again. Each of the board members commits their time, energy, often their own personal resources to the school community, not only by attending and participating in the board meetings that others are able to attend and participate in as well. They serve on committees that support the needs and work of the board. They attend and participate in leadership council meetings. They search for and share resources with other board members, the administration, and the community. They communicate with members of the community to help address specific needs brought forth. The board has asked members of the administration many times, both in board meetings and outside of meetings, if there are other ways the board can support the school community, which I believe we are very happy to do and feel that that is certainly is our role. In working to support those school community needs, the board must rely on resources available to it, and if that is not sufficient, must make decisions to address that deficiency in a fiscally responsible and reasonable manner. The harsh criticism levied at the board was inappropriate. The board is not irresponsible in seeking to work more effectively and efficiently as per our mandate. We all work hard. We are all conscientious, ethically, and morally driven to protect and educate every student in our district. The last board meeting was demoralizing. The tone and word choice explicitly implied that the school board district is irresponsible in managing the school budget. These are contentious times regarding institutional spending. Let's work together toward common goals and appropriate professional communication. Now we will move on to student matters. Are there any students in the Zoom who would like to? Actually, it looks like we have a student. We have our two student reps here tonight. Good evening. Thank you for coming to share some time with us. Did either one of you want to share anything with the board?
Yeah, let me go first. It's been a minute. I believe students should have a more positive outlook on our schools and students in general too. Students tend to have like a more students tend to be more negative when they enter the school, and negative, like being negative is so normalized, and it's sometimes it's not even like corrected or checked in the right way. Like sometimes parents, like a staff will ask like a question like, "Are you okay?" And if you say you're okay, they'll drop it immediately. And it's like, I don't know, it seems like sometimes they don't put like enough care or like enough attention behind behind it, because if they really want to know if you're okay, they'll continuously check up on you.
If anyone from the administration has any response, or maybe you can reach out to them individually if there's something you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I mean, I would like to respond that thank you so much for sharing that, because it's important for us to know. And I think that articulating that in school, with people that you do feel safe, if you haven't identified a safe adult, if you're working with a support person, and they can bring that back to like the SST team and the team that work to support individual students, it's really important. So I'm going to have the opportunity, because I heard it because I'm here tonight, to bring that back. Thank you for vocalizing it here. I think there are ways we can vocalize it at school too. Thank you.
Just as a point of information, can everybody belt it out? Because it's hard to hear across the room. The acoustics in the space is difficult.
My microphones would also appreciate that too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Something I would like to bring here is that I feel like we need more inclusiveness, if that's the right word, in our school, because I feel like we do a good job throughout like elementary school to the high school, but I've noticed that like there's people's biases kind of shadow over any inclusive activity, and that's not just with the staff, but that's also with the students, like the way we've been raised in our own individual families and homes, and same thing with the staff too. Like, I remember last semester in my Spanish class, all these my students in my class were born in America, they spoke English, everything. But I had a Spanish teacher who had just moved here from Spain. And I noticed that a lot of kids in my class took advantage of that, and I took my position of who I am and spoke up and was corrected my class because I just found it really disrespectful. And but there's not many other students that are gonna do what I did. And so I feel like I know that me speaking up and doing what I do is starting a shift, but I feel like we should have more times in school where we can come together, when we do those, the 10th grade come to ACE and then we talk in the auditorium. Yeah, the house meetings. Maybe we can mention how to be inclusive and how to recognize our biases and how to kind of shake them off and cleanse ourselves from them. And the same thing with staff. One of my teachers today, I had two students that are immigrants, and the teacher in the class, he kind of just spoke really fast and used a lot of complex vocabulary, and so I just feel like it wasn't really inclusive because I could feel that there was a gray area and that not just the students weren't kind of comprehending it the way that the other students were. So yeah.
I'd love an opportunity to speak to that too. The both of you are so articulate, and we've had the opportunity to hear you speak to staff. or I had the opportunity of hearing you during, it was a meeting, I can't remember what who facilitated, but your class was in the gym, and you spoke up, and that's what I think is the foundation for your participation here. What I think is that they need to hear from more than just the staff, and definitely from more than just the admin. So if
Yeah,
we
right.
put a group of students together that hosted the house meetings, and that it was a student-run house meeting, and that they heard it from you and can identify more with what you're feeling than what we kind of just described.
Yeah, and I saw in my email that there was an event happening. I forget what it was like, what it was called, but it was like student-led, like kind of like class things, and it was like, I think it was with staff and might be with students too. I'd have to recheck. But yeah, so I feel like that would be a good opportunity for that too.
Yeah, this group that works with Ms. Parker during her advisory, that would be a great place to bring that.
Thank you both.
Thank you very
Tim?
much.
Yeah, I just want to say that you really show why it's so important to have student representatives on the board. You bring so much, so thank you for your authenticity and candor.
Yeah, thanks.
What I'm wondering, I appreciate that we're hearing from students from the high school. I'm also wondering if maybe some of these issues are not things that I don't want to leave out the elementary schools.
Right.
So if there are similar issues, or if there are other, I don't know whether it's realistic to have elementary school students come and speak or bring forth anything, but I didn't want to leave out the elementary schools if there are particular things that the students in those schools wanted to bring forth, or.
I think if we had an opportunity to prepare elementary students to come to a board meeting and present on work that they're doing in their schools, I think that would be fabulous at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we hear so much about the high school and challenges or great things that are going on, and we definitely want to continue to hear those things and be a place where you can bring them to. I also want to make sure that we're not, because the elementary school kids are smaller, younger, so that would be actually great.
Yeah, I think that we should definitely get like middle schoolers and elementary students that are like feel confident enough and like to come up here and share, because I hear so many things from so many children in my neighborhood that like I just interact with all the time about things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I should bring that up at like the next meeting, but then I always forget it. So I feel like we definitely should have younger like representatives, because like their say is like just as important as ours, especially because we're in high school and we're about to age out of this like kind of system. So for the elementary students and middle schoolers, like it's like the change that we want and we like need as like in high school is like, it's still important, but the change that is needed in elementary and middle school is gonna be more like, I don't know if drastic's the word, but like it's gonna be so much more like intense and definitely needed and definitely really good.
So just a quick reminder, Paul, you can speak to this too, but every year there's a middle school leadership retreat, which is held in the summer on the Landmark College campus. And essentially, the work of those 2 days is student leaders analyzing the Panorama Climate Survey data, student climate survey data, and then they're tasked with going back into the schools to start the school year and to facilitate goal setting for the schools, and then opportunities to create student engagement conversations throughout the school year. So that is a really good avenue that we could kind of lean into to at least hear what the goals of our elementary schools are and how we're engaging with multiple student voices, not just the student leaders.
So Ruby, and then Matt, and then I got Paul.
There are two red pins.
Ruby.
I think just to carry off what Mark's saying, I think that the leadership team I know at Putney actually had a field, that leadership team of kids had a field trip to come to bands probably. But I wonder if there are moments leading up to the summer to help to kind of gel exactly what you're talking about. I think that's a great idea.
Matt?
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to vibe also with Tim. The student leaders are absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate the voices that you bring to this table. And I think it's a friendly reminder for parents too, in the community that attend this meeting to perhaps ask, if you have an elementary school student in your family, to ask them how they're feeling, thoughts and things that they would want to bring forward. And then parents who attend could bring that forward. I know I'm certainly doing that for my two boys.
Thank you. Jody?
Hi, Jody Normando Dummerston. I want to second everything that the students have said and other people have said. However, I have seen so many elementary school students who are very capable to come and speak to the board without being organized, without being, set up as to what to say. I think you could get some very good answers from them. And over the last several years, I've been very disappointed in what's been happening with our district. It's very high school oriented. And I feel that the elementary schools are getting left behind, even though there are some show and tells that are happening. I think, and I think that's showing up in the testing. I think, looking at the testing, which I think is coming up, or the high school has come up and the elementary schools have gone down. It's gone are the days when they had their own board that kept tabs on what was going on. This is a board that has too many things to do. And don't forget the elementary schools. They're more mature than you think they may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Anyone else in the Zoom? Any other students who would like to speak before we move on? Seeing no hands, we are going to move on to the administrative report. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, so speaking of our elementary schools, tonight our report is focused on new curriculum that we've been implementing at all of our elementary schools and middle schools in math and literacy. So EL and IM programs. And Bryn Tucker and Stacy Sawyer are going to take the lead and share with us the journey we've been on over the last 2 years.
I'm setting my timer for 20 minutes, right? I got the memo. So we're excited to share with you a little bit about what's happening with curriculum associated with policy G1, which I understand is under revision potentially as well, if that's true, or a look at. And we've been talking a lot about EL and IM, and we wanted to share a little bit about what's happening in the field, in the real business of implementation. And we'll try to make sure that we reserve some time toward the end for questions as well. So we go ahead and advance, Paul, please, if you don't mind. Something that's a little bit different, and if you can go, yeah. I said I don't need the clicker. About these programs is that it's really centering an inquiry-based approach, a culture of grappling for students, really building some common language for that, and linking that to a growth mindset. So this idea of, instead of a teacher asking and students answering in a very rote kind of approach to education, it's really creating a culture where students are authentically asking questions, grappling and working together to make meaning and understanding with the really talented and structured guide of the teachers. And it's a significant shift in an approach from some of the curricular programs that we had been using. So we'll talk a little bit about what that's like for our teachers and our students on the ground. I think this quote here is really great, that persistence and resilience only come from having been given the chance to work through difficult problems. And I think as adults here, that's what we show up to do as well. So that's really at the heart of these curricula. So Stacey's going to talk about the EL literacy curriculum that's being used in our K-8 program now. And then I'll speak a little bit about the illustrative mathematics program.
Yeah. So EL, we've talked a little bit about this in previous presentations, but EL is built around 3 real pillars. Habits of character, they refer to, and that's about being an effective learner, an ethical person, and contributing to a better world. And then obviously mastering knowledge and skills. That's an important piece of the puzzle, and having high standards for quality student work, having high expectations, diving into complex skills and making sure we support students with that culture of grappling so that they're prepared to meet those challenges. Go ahead, Paul. So it's based in the science of reading. We've talked about this before. I'm looking at the Scarborough's reading rope. There's two components that lead to skilled reading. That's the word recognition and language comprehension. And our EL program really delves into that language comprehension, building background knowledge, vocabulary, and the structures of language. We've talked a little bit about the other pieces, which is our phonics program, and how those all work together to build skilled reading, because ultimately the goal of reading is comprehending and making meaning. Go ahead. You can just, so some of these conceptual models are based in that science of reading. So if you'll click through, Paul, we've got some links to some research that's been done at the federal level in terms of how the EL program measures up statistically. And if you click those links, it'll give you some of those ed reports that show the high level of achievement in students and that research that supports that. There's some case studies from various parts of the country, different types of school districts, that show that the improvement in student outcomes as those programs are implemented. And then also we have some research behind our phonics program, which is implemented in most schools, the UFly program. So just thinking about the research that goes behind those programs. As we've been working through, this is kind of year one for many of our schools, year two for some schools who implemented last year one for many of the schools this year. So thinking we're in that process, doing some learning walks to just take a temperature check. Where are we? Where are teachers in classrooms? EL is a heavy lift. There's a lot it's a shift in teacher pedagogy. So thinking about where are we and how can we structure our professional development to support those teachers as they implement EL in every classroom. We did some of these learning walks back in November, December, and collected some data around what's happening from the teacher point of view, what's their practice looking like. You can see those bullets there. And then we also looked at students' engagement with text and using text evidence to support their thinking. We went into almost every single classroom. The link at the top shows the observation form that we used to collect that data, and in 65% of the classrooms, teachers were implementing EL lessons. Of course, we went in and real life happens. There was teachers out sick. There was teachers who were doing a variety of things with their students, some impromptu student discussions and class meetings around something that happened at lunch, for example. So just collecting that data, you can see the bar graphs that show what was proficient developing beginning and some areas where we didn't really see the things that we might, and those are the areas that we would target for professional development to help support teachers in that process. If you could go back one slide, Paul. Yeah, there you go.
Struggling with that.
The other piece of the learning walk was up around these 8 high leverage instructional practices. These are not necessarily specific to EL. They are embedded in EL, but they're really best practice in terms of yielding high student outcomes. So when we were looking at these high leverage practices, we were looking to see, are these practices embedded in teachers' practice in classrooms? It all starts with learning targets. Are we clear about what the learning goal is for the day? That's what would be a learning target. Teachers and students being clear about that. And then if we're clear about that, as we go through the lesson, how are we checking for understanding? Are the students understanding what the learning target is? EL is founded on a principle of total participation. We want to hear the voices of every student in the room, not just the ones who feel comfortable and confident to raise their hand and always answer the same questions. So really getting everyone to participate. So that piece of total participation, which kind of ties into protocols and student discourse, which is that student discussion piece. And then you can see the culture of grappling, which Bryn talked about a little bit before, about this idea of really thinking about problem solving and persevering through challenging tasks. And is that environment set up in the classroom for that? The questioning that happens, not just questions teachers are asking, but questions students ask, is an important piece of the puzzle, and that dialogue that they're having as part of that student discourse. And then anchor charts being the last piece there about what supports are we putting in place to help students solidify their learning into long-term memory, and what kind of supports are in the classroom to help deliver that instruction. We have a link to the 8 high leverage practice. Paul, if you'll stay there. So if you want to read some more in-depth information about those pieces. And then we're going to lead you in a protocol. As I said, EL's one of the founding principles is we want to hear from everyone's voice. So we're going to use one of those protocols tonight.
We're going to model it.
We're going to model. You're going to be like a literacy student. So we're going to do one called back-to-back, face-to-face. And the way this works is you're going to get with a partner and stand back-to-back. I'm going to give you a prompt related to this data. Bryn came around with a handout so you have it in front of you. So as you're thinking, I'm going to give you a prompt and you'll have some think time. That's the back-to-back part. So that gives you your own time to think about what the question is. We're modeling, Bryn and I. And then I'll say turn around, face your partner, and then when you face your partner, you have an opportunity to discuss the prompt together with your partner. Any questions about the protocol?
If you need help finding a partner, so we're gonna ask everyone to stand up. If you need help finding a partner, just put your hand up. There's an even number of people, so we can match you up that way.
Awesome.
And when you find your partner, stand back to back, please. And you can bring your chart with you so you can have that to look at. Don't forget your chart. You're gonna want to look at it.
You're gonna want your data. Oh, your hand up. Take your data.
Oh yeah, Jimmy. All right, first question.
So looking at the bar graphs, what would you think, what's an area of success based on the data that was collected? So just take a minute to think. What's an area of success that you see in that data? Go ahead and turn and talk to your partner.
There's a large evidence, there's also like a bar. There's a few other check understanding.
Yeah, these two definitely come. I think it's a combination of yellow and green. Oh yeah, green. Yeah.
And
We'll give about 10 more seconds to wrap up your conversation, please. 10 more seconds. And then go find a new partner and stand back to back. If you need to find a partner, raise your hand so you can find someone. New partner, back to back. All right, next question. Stacy, do you want to ask it?
The next question is, if you look at the data, what would be an area of need that we could address in professional development, and how might we go about doing that? Do you have any suggestions? So thinking about what would be an area of need.
And what's one idea of how we might be able to support that? And when you're ready to talk about that with your partner, you can turn face to face.
I do.
that you can have students.
And that'll go towards.
If you are interviewing our
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah, absolutely.
If you could please wrap up your conversation in the next 30 seconds or so, and we'll know we're ready when you're back at your seat. So we would love to hear your thoughts about some of those things, but we are on a tight timeline. So email us if you have ideas of improving culture drafting. I'm already waiting on that. We do want to recognize the implementation is not, we just started it and now we're really good at it. We figured everything out. It's a multi-year process, and we do have a multi-year implementation plan that we've talked about with you all in the past. We are so lucky to have coach support both from Stacy and also from Brian Bittner, who is really our coach for those bottom strands of the literacy rope. That's how we've kind of delineated their roles. And so here's a picture of Brian supporting a kindergarten phonics class in Dummerston. And on the right is some first grade students working on one of their performance tasks. They're creating a magnificent thing. They made a plan. They're using recycled materials. I actually went and visited this classroom on a day that the teacher was out, and I was talking to the kids like, well, what are you doing? And they could so beautifully explain their plan and tell me how they were demonstrating persistence, quote, by struggling with really hard projects, and even when it didn't work, they tried again. So just to give you a little flavor of what the curriculum is about. Yeah, and we have some support, obviously, for our teachers in our schools.
So we have done lots of professional development, both with building leaders and instructional coaches, to help to support the implementation behind EL. And then we're also doing some support with teachers. If you click the next thing, Paul, I'm just trying to move us along in our interest of time. So some examples of professional development that we have provided to classroom teachers throughout the year, and also looking ahead to next year, developing a plan using teacher input to support continued implementation. As Bryn mentioned, this is a multi-year process, and so soliciting input from teachers to help understand what exactly they feel they need as next steps.
So that was our new EL program. We like to do things really big in WSESU, and we had a lot of ESSER funds, so we also were implementing a new illustrative math program. That is now being taught also K-8. We had a fantastic trainer come for the BAMS folks this summer, and I think, Keith, everyone from your math department at that time participated in the training as well. So we'll give you a little bit of background and structure of the program, and specifically talk about the 5 core practices that are examined within IM. And similar to EL, we're really looking at student pedagogy. And at a PD session by our teachers, this is what teachers thought it meant to have a student-centered math program, to really focus student learning and questioning at the center of mathematics in the classroom. And we just wanted to share this because I think it's really exciting. I think sometimes when we talk about a curricular program, it's like, oh, and then there's this program and I have to follow it. And there are pieces of that when we're using evidence-based programs that we know work, and there's science and research behind them. But to see some of these words jump out in terms of what's that meaning for teachers in our classrooms, I think is really exciting.
So the ones that are larger in the center, are those?
More people entered that in.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So Similar to the EL research that Stacy shared, these are screen images from a site called Ed Reports that really evaluates curricular programs. And you can see most of these are slated all the way to the right, which is the greenest of the green in terms of the most evidence-based practices and the most impact for student learning. And that was really at the heart of the team that chose these programs to really help our students develop their skills and hopefully have a lot of fun doing that as well. So I did want to share, those are research K through 8. As I mentioned, IM is really based on these 5 practices for really orchestrating productive discussions and mathematical discourse in the classroom. This is the book that's founded on by NCTM. So we're really thinking about critical thinking, mathematical thinking, and thinking about those ties to social justice education for our students to give them that voice and give them those critical thinking skills. And there's a quote there from our own Michaela Sims, that teaching students to question and analyze helps them understand the world and themselves. And that's the basis of both of these curricular programs. The 5 practices are illustrated on the next slide. So real briefly, thinking about kid responses before the lesson and what misconceptions might be out there or tangles that they might get into. Really monitoring their work and engagement with the tasks that are presented. Selecting particular students to share out their mathematical work. And then really sequencing their responses in a deliberate way to help them build upon their thinking. And this also is a total engagement strategy, and I think creates that culture of grappling that we were talking about, where kids have different entry points and can really learn from one another versus just the teacher standing in the front of the room. And then of course connecting students' responses to one another and then connecting those back to key mathematical ideas. And both of these curricula have kind of a spiral effect, and so it's not like, well, I taught that in 2nd grade and they're never going to get it again. It spirals up as they move through the program. Really quickly, this is kind of the structure of the program. On the left is K1, 2, 5, and then 6 through 8. But you'll see it's very similar, so kids have a similar experience when they go through. Even though the activities in these portions of the lesson are different, they have some kind of warm-up or engagement strategy. Often that's a mathematical number talk, so some kind of image, and kids can really engage in that in a number of ways. Hands-on activities, synthesis of those activities, and then a chance to practice on their own. And then at the end, a time for everyone to come together. The cool downs that you see for K all the way through 8 are daily quick checks, formative assessments, so the teacher can see who got it and who didn't, and what do we need to adjust tomorrow. I heard that the math department had a meeting today to start a tiny bit of questioning and investigation, also related to some recent goal setting that's happened, of if any components of this program might also in the future align to some of the algebra and geometry classes that happen in the high school. And we're in the very baby beginning steps of looking at that and looking at recommendations for curricular programs. But it is a program that goes from K all the way up through algebra and geometry. Next steps also for math. Excuse me, we had 4 times grade level meetings last year. Around IM implementation. Most of our schools went heavy in IM implementation last year, EL implementation this year. There's been a request from many teachers to re-examine that this coming March when we have our grade level meetings. This is a picture of the fantastic trainer that came to us from Brooklyn at BAMS this summer to train all of the math teachers there. I talked about the NACE recommendations and general math curricular investigations that are happening at the high school as well. And we are in process of developing a similar learning walk resource that Stacy was talking about for EL, so we can again go and visit all of our classrooms and see where we're really strong with implementation of IM and what our next steps are to support our teachers and our students. Sean, how are we doing on time?
You're right, spot on. I would say that we could probably subtract the back-to-back time that we spent.
That was part of our lesson though. Yeah, so that's a quick overview of where we're at with implementation of both EL and IM. Huge kudos to our teachers and our paras and our administrators and also our students. It's a big learning curve, and we're developing new structures and new processes for looking at literacy and math. We've done a lot of research to figure out what's best practice out there and what's evidence-based, and so we're working really hard to now support that in the field, and we're closely monitoring data. We know that when we implement a new program, we're not going to see all of our test scores jump the very first year, but we're keeping a very close eye on both our benchmark data and also our end of the year BTCAP data. We'll have year 2 this year so we can take a look and continue to evaluate how that's going. We collect frequent teacher feedback at all of the grade level meetings and trainings to see how that goes.
I'd also add kudos to our school board for supporting the purchase of new programming and supporting the professional development that is so important to engage in, to implement our programs adequately, and to support our teachers. So,
That's
thank you.
really true. I was at a staff meeting at a school today, and the principal was asking the staff, what do you think are some barriers for our kids achieving high levels with literacy, was the conversation in that particular meeting. And there were so many things that were brainstormed, you know, challenges at home and substitutes and whatever the thing is. But not one person said, we don't have good materials. We don't have an excellent curriculum. We don't have research-based practices. That wasn't even, I mean, it was like no one even thought of that. And that's rare, to be in a school system where we have such high quality curricular programs to offer our teachers and our students for learning. So absolutely, Mark, thank you.
Is this kind of like style gonna be like implemented in the high school too? Because I feel like it definitely needs to.
You want to do back-to-back, face-to-face?
I can add a little bit about the discussion that is happening, at least in the math department. So we're starting to look at aligning curriculum and this piece of grappling that is just so important. And we have math teachers who are sort of doing some of that in the classroom now and figuring out how to move away from that. You know, I'll show you, you'll practice it, and then, you know, we'll do it together, you do our own kind of model. And one of the teachers brought to my attention a book called Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics. And that turned out into doing a book study with the department, and that is on their own time for some professional development points with Hannah, myself, and Nancy Johnson. And that's exactly what it's addressing. And so that grappling piece, and we call it, you know, problem solving. I hadn't heard that particular terminology, but it's awesome, and that's what they're.
I think, Laura, what you're bringing up is a really huge potential for our school system, especially as some of our elementary and middle school students are learning these routines and these ways of engaging in conversation and curricula together, to then extend that. And although some of these are introduced in the math curriculum or the literacy curriculum, a lot of those instructional practices don't need to be just locked into the EL program, for example. And so your comment really makes me think, how can we really maximize our professional development opportunities to have our kindergarten teachers as well as our 11th grade teachers practicing some of these protocols and thinking about how they can be applied to their classroom.
Yeah, especially as this gets like more like common and like, you know, like it really gets like nailed into like the program.
Yeah.
That like if students become so used to this type of way in elementary, middle school, and then they go to high school and like all they have is like some old teacher barking at them how to do stuff, like it's gonna get confusing, it's gonna throw them off. Like it already throws us like me off, like especially like all my other classmates too. Because like these teachers, they just think that like they're gonna absorb like everything that they say. It's like, no, you got too much going on, especially like the culture outside of school. Like there is way too much going on to just hear somebody talk and like not even be engaged with not only the work but with each other. You know?
That's a really powerful statement.
And while the EL curriculum only goes K-8, there is lots of support for leaders of their own learning and something they call CREW, which is really a high school model that embeds a lot of these same practices into a high school environment where you can really encourage students to be more engaged in the learning process and take ownership of their learning. And so those would be two pieces from the EL side that we could look at from that piece.
Yeah. And I think the NEASC accreditation report and recommendations that I know they're working on getting back to us around coordinated curriculum is a great opportunity to look at that in our high school system as well, with student feedback and leadership. Yeah.
I'd just like to say that when my son was in high school, they had the math program, and it really touched on a lot of the things that you just presented. And you know, it was an excellent program. I think it stood for Interactive Math Program, if I remember correctly. And set my son on a rocket ship that he hasn't returned. So he's minored in math, and so it was really a good starting point.
Thank you. All right,
Thank
well,
you
we
very
will keep you
much.
abreast as we continue implementation. Tim, thank you so much.
Well,
Oh, sorry, Tim.
Sorry, just one quick one. So I remember last year, I think, reading about what's missing in literacy assessment is persistence in reading whole books. So a student can, in this social media age, a student can do well in reading a page or even the chapter, but they just haven't become accustomed to reading entire books. And the suggestion was to build on it and get through 12 in requiring students to read more and more. So literacy is one thing, persistence and being able to read whole books is something else.
I will say one thing that was exciting about unboxing EL was a little different from the program that many schools were using before called Reading Street, which was short vignettes of stories from books in a textbook. We spent time 2 summers ago at very hot gymnasiums all over the district unboxing, and they are beautiful, real books that kids have in their hands. And it started in kindergarten, actually. Some of the kindergarten teachers would ask us, like, they can't read yet. Why is there a copy of a book for every single kid in my class? And it's that idea about building stamina and having every child have a book and feel.
I know Oak Grove has a goal for students to read like 1,000 books in 1 year. I don't know how, if other schools are doing that. That's good.
I have 2 things to go with what you said. Is like a lot of people in this like day and age, like they can read on their phones so much, but as soon as it comes to a book, they're like, forget it. And it's definitely got to do with the dopamine rush that they get from our phones. And so I feel like if we were to have more books that we read that are more like, because being creative and being artistic is like, it releases dopamine too. It's just, when we read boring things, it's like we stop, our brain kind of slows down. So like,
recording in progress.
So like, is it good now? Is it? No. Okay. I feel like we should have kind of like try to find new styles of textbooks and stuff that aren't so like kind of like slowing down. Also, but like not just like creative, but like also do put words in there that could trigger like growth mindset and everything. And shoot, what was the thing I was gonna say? Oh, I don't forget. But yeah.
So any brands and stuff?
Well, I want to say I am continually impressed with all the things that you, not only are you sharing with us, but obviously the knowledge that you have and experience and information that you bring to us. So thank you very much.
And thank you for your total participation tonight. Yes.
So retirement. Sue Vincent, academic support teacher, Putney Central School, will be retiring at the end of the school year.
So is there a motion to accept the retirement of Sue Vinson?
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the retirement with appreciation, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Thank you very much. And the board recorder position, I just put that on there because I didn't know if there was anything else. And I guess if we, I think maybe Mo has gotten some responses, but I want to encourage anyone in the community who believes that they have the time and the interest to assist the board to please reach out.
Yeah, I'll give a quick update. I think we have about 7 applications right now that we've received, and I think the idea is to review those with you, Deborah, tomorrow. Part of the idea of the bigger picture.
Thank you. All right. Sounds great. So then we move on to the fiscal report. So I will turn it over to Frank.
Okay. Thank you. We have a few items to
address, and let's see, I'm assuming we'll address maybe two proposed motions for capital projects first. We have the Green Street roof bid. We received 3 bids, and we're recommending that we award the bid to Triumph Roofing in the amount of $322,000. And then we also have the ESSER-funded Guilford School window replacement project with a bid award recommendation. And that is to Monadnock Building Commercial Company. And the amount of that bid was $362,949. So both of these projects are contemplated in the capital plan that the board approved last May for fiscal year '24. And as you may recall, the ESSER-funded projects have to be done no later than August of this coming year in order to access the funding. So that's a recommendation, request for a motion to approve those 2 bid awards.
I would like to move that the Green Street roof bid award in the amount of $322,000 to Triumph Builders, or whatever.
Triumph Roofing, yeah.
And the Guilford EES window replacement bid award, which is $362,949. And that's to
Monadnock Commercial Building
Yeah.
Company.
So, I mean, that's one.
I just have one question about the roofing. How long do the roofs last?
Typically a 20-year warranty.
And are there like it's different than our housing, the typical house. Is there like special construction? Or?
Yes, it's the EPDM, and the specifications ask for a higher quality in a white color. It is a little more expensive, but it's much more environmentally conducive to lower energy use.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you just clarify, is that, I know the district is committed to certain efforts to be more energy efficient, et cetera. And I know in the past when we were, I don't remember when it was, we were talking about the academy school and the.
They're having hearing issues. They're not hearing you. Maybe you can move that paper, the paper that don't.
Can you hear me now?
Looks like it. Yeah.
Okay.
Speak
All
real
right.
loud.
Sorry about that. I'm just wondering if is this you're talking about a requirement? Is that based on the
Jody, can you hear us now?
Apparently not.
Robin and Matt, can you hear us? Can anybody hear us out there in Zoom land?
I got dropped from the meeting.
Did the whole meeting get dropped?
Recording in progress.
Can you hear us?
Matt, can you hear us?
Clearly not.
Clearly not.
We need a sign.
Oh, looks like we dropped out. Did BCTV drop out? No, you're there. Matt, we can't hear you. Oh, Robin can hear him. Clearly she's laughing at something he said.
Yeah, I'm back in Lisbon now, so I should be able to be somewhat now. Can you hear us now? Good. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So my question was, I know in the past when we were talking about the Academy School and some of the, Academy School and some of the upgrades that were required there, it was based on industry standards or requirements?
On energy.
So is this one or the other, or is it like a combination? You're talking about this white?
Yeah, it's EPDM is the rubber roofs for commercial buildings. And yes, this is a standard that is recommended for an energy efficient upgrade.
Thank you. Any other questions on moving?
I'm wondering if, this seems great. I wonder if you could articulate what the process is, who reviews the bids, who considers them, who decides on what to bring forward, because I might have missed it. I've had a lot going on, but I haven't seen anything in my inbox that is a copy of a bid. So we're going on your recommendation, and I'm just wondering what's backing up that recommendation.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we are going to go over that in just a little bit in the agenda. Equivalent of what we did last year this time. I don't know if you recall, but we had a very thorough review of the capital plan.
Yeah.
And that is what cues these projects.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 60 projects in the fiscal year 25 proposal. There's nearly 50 projects in the current year.
Mm-hmm.
So back about this time last year, the board reviewed the capital plan based on our presentation. We had several meetings, I don't know if you recall, but we had several meetings around different projects and the time frame of those, the scope, the funding. So once those are identified, which as I say again, last board meeting, Finance Committee reviewed the capital plan. I had mentioned it to the board and had distributed to the board last meeting. I also have hard copies this evening, so it is right after our budget discussion. But
I kind of meant not about why this project, but more why this particular bid. Like how many bids were there? Was this one the high or the low? Mm-hmm. What was the determination around putting this particular bid forward?
Sure. So it all stems from that approved plan, that board approved plan. So that's the authorization to proceed. And then from there, it's the state bid law that really is the protocol that we must follow. And that is projects over $40,000. We do initiate a sealed bid process for these larger projects. It's not required to have a sealed bid process by state law, but you must have at least 3 bids, and if we don't, then we have to request a waiver of the bid rules by the secretary. So the process for this particular project in Green Street was to solicitate, first have an engineering specification developed that identified specifically the types of improvements and repair, whether there's certain types of flashing, the drains. This particular building has a skylight that requires a particular type of roofing installation. So those things are articulated, and fortunately we have Robert Clark, our facility director for the supervisory union, and then we have very competent facility managers that really help inform the specifications. So that occurs. The specification is advertised. Typically, we advertise in the paper and then also send direct mail to any vendor that we are aware in the region that is a qualified vendor to do the work, scope of work. We also distribute the specifications to there are several subscription agencies where construction companies pay a subscription fee, and then the projects are listed by those services so that it's a very broad, competitive environment. So that all occurred back in December, and Robert Clark is our primary expert for these kinds of projects, but if there is an engineer that needs oversight because of a number of technical areas that we're not expert in, then oftentimes we'll have the engineer actually review the bid and make a recommendation. With roofing, it's pretty routine. We have a lot of experience with roofing projects, so we generally don't need to pay an oversight agent to do that. So for Green Street, we had 3 bids. Melanson was $399,000. The bid award you just are considering was $322,000. There was a third bid. It was less than $300,000, but they had substituted an inferior product, so it didn't meet the bid specification. They are not qualified. For the Guilford project, the window, that we only received 2 bids, even though we asked directly for at least 5 firms. And I did have to write a request for a waiver of the bid rules to the Secretary of Education. That was granted based on the document that Tracy actually helped assemble, which is all of the evidence of us communicating directly with various vendors and asking for a competitive bid. So, and again, the window project, we've got a lot of experience with those sorts of things. We don't need an oversight engineer, even though we did engage a firm to design the specifications and the contract documents. That's the basic process.
That's helpful.
Any questions? Do we anticipate any other schools' roofing coming up?
Oh, yes.
Soon? Okay.
Yes, and again, we'll go over all of those in the capital plan. But yeah, the high school in particular has 3 acres of roofing. And as you know, we talked last meeting about the bond being paid off, and that is the origin of most of those 3 acres of roofs. So that's more than 20 years old. Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion regarding the Green Street roof bid award and the Guilford ESSER funded window replacement bid award, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay.
So we move to the budget discussion?
Still with you.
Very good. Okay, and Paul, are you our host? Can I do a share?
I've set up multiple screen sharing, so yes, you can share this here.
Okay. All right, so let me see. I did email out documents. Maybe I can have some help. So what you have available, if you wish, then yes.
Can I make rounds?
You could make rounds. And actually, this is the first.
Well,
Yep. Yeah.
this first?
Yep. It doesn't matter how you do it. It's just this is the document we're going to be discussing. Thank you. And I need one. Okay, so for our budget presentation this evening related to the Windham Southeast School District. Proposed budget has not changed since our last draft and discussion of January 9th. However, if you recall that we did have some changes to some of the assumptions, some of the line item assumptions. So those are included. Thank you. Those are included in this version. This is also the document that's been on the website now for a couple of weeks, and it does include the detail. So as just a very quick overview for folks that may not have seen this with our Zoom participants, the proposed budget is $65,846,000 for fiscal year 25. That's the period that begins in July of 2024 and it ends in June of 2025. We started the planning for this back in October. The Finance Committee met in November and December to review several components of this budget, including a sort of elementary overview and then a secondary overview, and then additional reviews of the revenue assumptions and then the funding statistics. So as you can see, the proposed spending is up 3%, or 1.9 million over the current year. The second page is our budget planning timeline. So we do like to revisit some of the action items that are in our near future. And when you look at the dates down that column, you see here we are on January 23rd, which is where we need to put this budget into motion in terms of preparing for the public warning and then creating the annual report that's distributed to our electorate. The meeting is scheduled, the annual meeting to vote by the electorate is scheduled on March 19th, you see there. And we are required to have an official public information meeting within 10 days, so you see that we have that scheduled for March 12th. And that is an in-person meeting. Some of the highlights that we have included are on page 3. That illustrates some of our changes. The fiscal pressures. We will maybe spend a little bit more time on the tax rate because we do have a letter from the legislature that was sent to the school boards. I don't know if folks have read the letter, but I do want to highlight that is the only additional correspondence I've received from the agency or the legislature that informs the budget process. But you can see that the school board version of this budget proposal creates a $1.59 statistic in terms of a proposed school homestead property tax. That's a 5% change, and that is because of Act 127, it being eligible for a cap, a 5% cap. If Act 127 did not exist, and this budget was presented as it is, that actually would be a 9% impact. But Act 127 caps the spending proposal and the revenues that we see and the number of students that we're serving derives the Act 127 equalized tax rate of 5%. That is not the CLA adjusted tax rate. And that is the one that folks, if nothing else changes, would see in their tax bills. We'll cover that in just a moment. Some of the major changes to this proposal, you see the enrollment statistics, very different, 2,200 in the current year, and then 3,734. It's not that we have a lot more students. This is again Act 127 assigning very different weights to the way in which all public schools utilize the Agents of Ed statistics to derive our property tax. The reason why those numbers are so much higher is because the state has substantially increased what they call a weighting factor for students in poverty. It was 0.25 weight, and now I believe it's a little bit over 1. So it's, that's a very large increase, right? On the fiscal spending side, some of the pressures. Now, remember, we said the entire budget's up 3% or about 1.9 million. Well, those are the sort of the major factors. Of course, we are primarily a personnel service entity, so you might expect that most of our increases are associated with salary and benefits, and there you see wage increases of $791,000, and the health insurance primarily up over $1 million. That's a 16% increase on the average claim cost. We also have had significant increases in services required for our special education services, and that is another one of those large increases, but it's all within overall, our less than our inflation rate, right? The whole budget's up 3%. Well, we're not up 2.6 million, we're less than that, and one reason for that is in terms of reductions in spending in this budget is we finally paid off that 20-year bond. So what was a $1.6 million expense is no longer an obligation of the district. However, as you know, we've added significant capital improvement spending to make sure that we sustain the useful life of those assets that were built 20 years ago. They need to be replaced. And if we don't replace them, roofs will leak and floors will buckle, and we won't have a good learning environment. So when we look at actual student counts, you can see that we are actually very level. 2,398 students was the count this time last year, and this year 2,402 students. So that's obviously a very stable projection, and then very similar staffing levels. Our total staffing levels are very similar, 435 folks. We will spend some time with our capital plan overview, maybe after our budget discussion, but you see here we have a reference to the 24, 25, 26, and fiscal year 27, about 14 million in capital projects that have been identified. So that's our overview. A little bit more on the school funding formula, and then happy to just take questions, or if anyone else wants to interject. So we've mentioned that Act 127 is a major impact to the way in which schools are funded, and this is all public schools in Vermont. What this document shows is what we just reviewed: 65 million in spending proposed, 3% increase. We have 7.3 million in revenues, revenues such as school tuition at UHS from our Dover kids and our Marlboro kids and our other non-member town. We have 7 million of that type of revenue where we don't have to ask our own local residents for funding. So the state has us take away that type of revenue from our spending plan, and we get this number called education spending, or it's 65 minus 7 is 58 million. That's divided by this new weighted average statistic that the state has given us, and it substantially lowered the state's definition of what's called education spending per long-term weighted average pupil. You can look at this document across the state, and we're all required to calculate our funding in the same way. So the state has said, okay, our number is 15,660 per student, and then we compare ourselves to what the state will announce as the yield, which is this 9,400. That's the simple calculation that identifies your tax rate. And that would be the school board's proposed tax rate without dealing with the real estate market. So 15,660 divided by 9,452 is $1.65. And that is that 9% increase I was mentioning. But we're not going to pay 9% because Act 127 says that as long as that increase is less than 10%, then we will be capped at 5%. And the rationale there, again, is there's just so many changes, very difficult for any district to have anticipated this a year ago before we issued contracts and before we developed programs and, identified those initiatives that Brandon and Stacy has just reviewed with us. So the board's proposed homestead property tax would be derived at $1.59 or a 5%, and then folks can see that that number is much less than it was a couple of years ago. $1.71, $1.61, but we're comparing that to $1.51. That is our current equalized tax rate. The trouble where the whole state is having, and the reason why we're going to review this letter from Emily Kornhauser and our other legislative representatives is these numbers here. The CLAs, the common level of appraisal, has varied dramatically from tax assessed values set by our listers, our town listers. And as real estate sales deviate and actual closing sale prices are higher than our tax assessed values, it's an inverse relationship. It says like, for example, in Brattleboro's tax assessed value is only 77% of real estate value that is selling. And therefore, the state says, well, we better raise the board's $1.59 up the difference between if it was 100% versus 77%. So they're saying we're going to raise the taxes 23%. Because they're saying that the listed value is underrepresented in Brattleboro, but it's also the case in Dummerston, 84%. Not so much in Guilford because Guilford went out and reappraised just last year. So they're at 95%. And then Putney at 72%. So those numbers are the statistics that the town offices have to apply against the school board proposed tax rate of $1.59, and that's where we get these very high tax rates you see at this bottom chart. Brattleboro would be $2 if nothing changed. If the state does not change the yield number, then this is what we would see. If the state set the yield number at 11,000 instead of 9,400, then we would see rates that would be certainly less than 10%. They would not be this amazingly egregious kind of situation that we're in. So because of this dynamic, the state is just starting to collect this data. Actually, I had a request today to report what is the draft budget for this school district and what is it for Vernon. I reported the draft budgets. Next week I have to report what the boards have approved. That's all going to the legislature, and they're going to try to grapple with this unsustainable level of taxation. But they've got to find the revenues to offset these variations. So here's the letter. Have most of you seen this letter? Yeah. Okay. So I don't need to perseverate too much on it, but the gist of it here is that down here in the fourth paragraph, we intend to have all districts that utilize the 5% threshold, that's us, present their budgets to a reimagined tax rate review committee. So we'll wait to hear what that looks like. And this would be a matter of doing what we always do, which is we're presenting a plan that meets our student needs, where they are at, and knowing where we have been and where our strategic plan needs to go, addressing our learning laws, our learning needs, and all of the programs that we've been talking about here for the last year. So that is the overview that I had thought might be helpful. But do recall that there is no change in the spending plans that we have discussed since our last meeting.
I think it's appropriate at this time to make a motion. And I would like to make a motion that the Windham Southeast School District approve the FY25 proposed budget in the amount of $65,846,891.
Jody, I know you have your hand up. I'm going to give the board members an opportunity to chime in first. You guys have your hand, and then
I just have one question about it. Says legislator has suspended the school spending penalty threshold for fiscal year 25. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? And then if this was not suspended, would you be in any way in trouble with that? Or, I don't know if that word doesn't say trouble, but
Yeah. No, good question. The spending threshold was set at 125% of the average spending across the state. So the threshold said that if a board presented a budget more than 125% above the average, then they were going to double the tax on that additional spending. So it was a real disincentive to, spend a lot more than the state average. And this system was always close to that threshold, but never subject to it. They suspended that threshold primarily, I believe, because they once again felt that this redistribution of the education fund resource, trying to align it with tax capacity of each town, was again too hard to predict. So they're like, well, we can't really impose those kinds of penalties on boards when none of us have the ability to really predict what, like for example, what we're seeing now. How will the real estate market impact the way in which school funding is allocated to our citizens, our residents? So that was sort of the rationale for why they suspended it. And the other part of your question, I can't really answer in terms of, what would it look like now, because they haven't redefined that number. So there is no kind of new standard to compare ourselves to.
Ruby?
So that letter that was up a minute ago, my reading of it is kind of the district needs to come to the table and present. And then there's also some public meeting or hearing that is on Thursday of this week. And so you may not be the person to answer this, but maybe you have some insight. So we're looking to approve this budget tonight. And then I don't understand, like the sequencing of events is confusing to me. I'm sure they're confusing for everyone who got that letter. But are we expecting that if we had a delegation or if you presented to whatever committee and made our case, is there a chance that the state will come back and say, yeah, not good enough? That's not.
Seems unlikely because the state statutes require that the electorate approve or modify the public school budget. For years, it's funny how the legislature's created disincentives, sticks and carrots to encourage school boards to modify spending, or in many cases, you might consider restrained spending. But ultimately, the state does not they haven't given themselves the authority to overrule the school board, or it's always what does the electorate What is the decision of the electorate? The electorate will, your article that you're going to warn for the March meeting is, shall the electorate authorize the school board to expend $65 million? And that's the official arbiter as to what gets spent or not. So it's hard to imagine after the board warns the budget, how is the state going to redefine a board's proposal, or maybe a board's proposal on behalf of the board to the public? I don't see that path forward, but this is just me speculating. So I guess my answer is no, I don't have the answer.
Okay, thank you.
The Independent Budget Review Committee submits its report after we vote on this. Is it at all possible in coming years for them to complete their report before we need to vote on this? It just doesn't make sense to me that they write a report that we get after we voted on it.
Well, I think their intent is to take the deliberative process and the result and then analyze it and share their view of the process and the result with the community. That's always been the case prior to the, but it's definitely a question for them. I know that they and Ruby, were you part of that committee at one point?
Last year.
You know, I know that their objective is to analyze a final result so that they can present their findings, just like an audit would be. So that there's a lot of work to do the calculations and the analysis that they do, and then if the board changes a number, it changes all of the analyses and the potential findings. So I suspect that might be their point of view.
Jody.
Okay, am I unmuted? I have a few questions. First of all, I want to thank, Paul and Frank and Mark. They've been very helpful to send me things like Act 127, et cetera. First question is, where is the SU budget?
So the ESSER budget is a deliberative process that starts in October as well, and it is reviewed by the supervisory union board over the course of November and December. And then because the SU budget is not presented to the voters, it's always been presented, and this is again by state law, presented to the SU board. It is the SU board that votes on it, and then those assumptions go into the district budgets. In this case, it would be the Vernon budget and the Windham Southeast School District budget. And those are, if you wanted to review those assumptions, you would see them, but on the very first page of the budget document, there is a line item there that identifies that. And that budget is basically complete, and it's intentional that it's done in that sequence so that the district boards can see the programs that are planned for, and then of course the assessment that is associated with that. Also keep in mind the state statutes changed a few years ago that required supervisory unions to budget and essentially employ for special education services, food services, and then also transportation. And that is why years ago supervisory union budget was $1 million, and now it's, because of primarily special education services, it's $30 million.
So is it included in your $65 million?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And where can I find the SU budget?
Oh, yes, that's also on the website, and I work with Paul to try to make the distinguish between Windham Southeast Supervisory Union, Windham Southeast School District and then Vernon School District very apparent. I can illustrate that real quick if we'd like. I'm going to share my screen.
Oops, Carrie Amadon just said, here it is. So she must have sent it to me. I couldn't find it.
You all set?
So another question is, your athletics and your SD budget. Is everything listed under the sport, or are some other things concerning athletics listed under other headings?
No, yeah, athletics are all in one place for particularly the high school. Each school has its own athletics section. So you would be able to find the UHS athletic budget proposal in the detailed document.
So, for example, if you had girls soccer, every single thing is listed under girls soccer. It's not listed. You don't have under transportation. You don't have under food. You don't have anything else like that. Then.
That's right. Each program, like basketball, soccer, hockey, lacrosse, yeah, it's got its own section in the budget. That's correct.
I thank you. I have more questions and you'll probably hear from me, but maybe even tonight again. But thank you very much.
You're welcome. Glad to help.
So Robin and then Christina Naylor.
I just wanted to comment on the question about the Budget Review Committee. That the committee's purpose is to advise the electorate, not to advise the board. So that's why they complete their report after we have passed a budget. And then they are going to tell the voters whether or not they support this budget.
Thank you, Robin. Christina?
Thank you, Robin, for saying what I was going to say. And also, there was some technical audio difficulties when Frank was, I think, discussing the potential for a yield change. So I was really interested because there's been some discussion at the state level about lowering the yield, which my stomach flops over when I say that. And I did not hear, can they not change the yield, or what the circumstance is with that, why it's not reflecting the current state level yield recommendation?
Yeah, at this point, I haven't received any kind of official recommendation that overrides the tax commissioner's letter to the school boards. So I understand there is a lower number. I think it's about 9,170 in consideration in a committee, but I have not received, and I don't believe any business managers have received a recommendation. I think if there was one, you would have seen it in that letter from Emily.
So we can, now with my IBRC hat on, we could pretty much assume that that's a good number to go with as we ponder the budget, that they're probably not going to change it from here on out and wreak havoc on everybody?
No, I've never seen such volatility in these state statistics. I really can't predict what they're going to do. I know that the legislature has always been very supportive of public education, and in the end, in May and June, before they adjourn, it seems that they have always found a way to make public education affordable in Vermont. And they recognize 15% tax increases is not affordable. So it's hard to imagine that they won't find a alternative statistic, an indice. You know, right now it's a CLA that is just incredibly volatile. It's not a very good statistic when we employ folks over the long term, and we have students that have a career for 13 years, 14 years in our system. It's not a good way to fund public ed when you have your CLA statistics changing by 25% over a 3-year period. So I've got to believe they recognize that, and they will. I'm sure they're working on some kind of an alternative. Because the bottom line is, as you can see, we're proposing a 3% increase in spending. We have the same number of students that we had last year. We don't need 25% more money. So why would you tax us 25% more? And of course, that's oversimplifying a lot of dynamics, but you know, on a big picture level, I think we spend about 2.5 billion in the state for public ed. Probably not going to spend a whole lot more than that in the new year. And yet our real estate values have gone through the roof. Everybody probably has a story in the room about the neighbor's house listed for 200,000 and sold for 350. So that's the problem I see in state policy right now. My recommendation has been to separate the volatile, particularly second home market from the non-homestead grand list. I understand there are some folks that are working on that.
Thank you, Frank.
Sure.
Sean?
I don't think it's being underestimated. What Frank just alluded to is that the real estate market is so volatile. I'm a lister in the town of Guilford, and it's just, you can't believe what's happening. And this is a statewide phenomenon. So it just changes so much what it means to do what we're doing tonight, which is really, you know, it's too bad. And hopefully it'll get changed. I think the legislature does have the ability to either do something in the CLA or to raise the yield norm. So I've been in touch with every representative from Windham County, and Kate Webb, the chair of the education of the House, and the senator also, native from our senator. So they're all well aware of the difficulties that the towns are facing.
Kind of a simple way I look at it is that COVID had an effect on real estate. It also had an effect on student learning. Let's create a formula where the increase in real estate market is not affecting the children or their future.
Well put.
Any other questions, comments?
I have one. So something caught my eye, and I'm gonna share what I wrote first, and then I'll relate it to what I see on the paper. But I know that there's unfortunately a handful of students that don't have access to fresh foods, and or even the amount of food that they should be intaking. So I see that the athletics is $821,002. That's kind of the fund for next year, right?
That's right.
And food, so that's over that's around $700,000 more funded into that rather than food. And so I do believe that we should be active and we should have all these sports or whatever. It's okay, but I feel we could at least adjust it. I feel at least a little bit, because there's no way that we're getting $700,000 less in our food, which we literally need to survive.
Absolutely.
Than athletics.
Yeah.
So it's
So Laura, let me explain something that you wouldn't know unless you were one of these school board members for years. But the state has said this is not the entity that operates the food service, even though it's the one you see in your building. So that's kind of an odd construction, but that's this idea that there's a school district, but then there's also the supervisory union that's a separate entity. So my point is that's where the money is. There's 2.5 million, 2.7 million in spending in the food service, but it's not in this entity. So there are three entities in our region that are affiliated. There's this school district, there's the Vernon School District, and then there's the supervisory union. Mark is the superintendent for the supervisory union, and the state says that we will employ the food service folks, or in our case, contract for services. In Putney, we employ, in In most of our schools, we contract for food services. So it's an excellent observation. We do spend a lot more on the food service than we do on the sports.
Thanks. It's just concerning to see at first. It's like,
Yeah.
food is so important, and especially having access to fresh food, especially when there's so many students who don't have that access, as like compared to like other students and other staff too. Even staff might not have as much access to fresh food. Most of the time when they go to lunch, they have to pay for it out of pocket. So, but I get things are changing now because like I communicate with some of the people in the cafeteria that I forget his name, but we was talking sometimes, and but yeah, thanks. Tim?
At our last board meeting of our, Sue Grabowski, our food coordinator, has agreed to write a review of food services in the district. So if you have specific questions for her, you can send them to me and I will pass them on to her to include in that report.
It's also really helpful if you share that with Tracy or Hannah, any of your requests. That's another thing I was going to report on later in the meeting under the agenda. But the food service company very much wants feedback and will act on it. There's no question they will act on it. And then you're probably aware, because we do, we affiliate ourselves with the child nutrition program and the school lunch program. It's largely subsidized by the federal government, and as part of that, they have a nutritional standard and they have certain requirements. So there are menu constraints that we have to follow, but we're always interested in fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, and I know they're available, but maybe they're not available to the extent that makes sense to you. So we'd love to hear that feedback.
I watched the budget address by our governor at one today, and he had said that this tax increase is not sustainable, and the people of Vermont, they're feeling the pressure. So I see what you're saying about what your hope is. I hope that too. I hope that we can come up with a solution, because it's very scary, and through no people's fault of their own. Vermont is very attractive, and people want to buy houses, and they're willing to pay way over asking price. But folks live here, and they want to continue living here. So hopefully a solution comes in the future.
Related to that point, I don't want to miss the opportunity to also address the income sensitivity provision. I don't know if it was in the governor's address. I'd love to listen to that. I'm sure it was recorded, but this budget proposal that you have on that tax page we were looking at, it identifies approximately a 3% threshold on income if folks are eligible for the income sensitivity. So there is a substantial cap on the amount of property tax liability folks would incur if they qualify. You've got to file your Vermont tax return, and you have to file your homestead declaration form. And my understanding is incomes under 140,000 of household income are eligible to some degree. Incomes less than 90,000 are fully subject to this 3% cap of household income. And then there are two other tiers. Incomes less than 47,000 is another lower tax liability, and then I believe incomes under 25,000, I think it's really, really restricted. So I've been told by the tax department that 70% of Vermonters are eligible for the income sensitivity provision, which means that these crazy tax rates would really be capped for the majority, the vast majority. But there's still, these impacts though would still affect the business owners, the non-resident grand list property owners, and folks that are not eligible for income sensitivity. Good point.
Any other questions? Did you have another part to this?
Well, I did want to review the capital plan. The capital plan assumptions are all in the $65 million number that Sean has made a motion for, so I don't see it as contingent, but if you want, we can go to the capital plan as well, and then you'll have all, all of the related spending. But, the capital plan is
I'm looking to schedule a potential break in here.
Mhm.
'Cause, so I just, when would be the best, how much time do you think you will need for that so I can?
I would say, I would be comfortable spending 10 minutes on it if that's enough for the board, but if you have questions, we can spend more.
Okay, all right. Anybody have any other questions before Frank moves on to? Do we need to vote on this, or do we need to do the capital plan information before the vote, or?
No, because the capital plan assumptions are in this proposal, you could vote on this proposal now.
Okay, is there any more discussion, questions, et cetera, before we take a vote on the budget? Seeing none, the motion has been made to approve the budget. And Sean did read out the numbers. They're not rolling off my tongue though. So all those in favor of approving the budget, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. The budget has passed, and so then I will hand it back over to you to deal with the capital plan, and then we'll take a break.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right. So the capital plan, I'll share my screen as well. So you have this, it is document we emailed folks back on the 9th. And the Finance Committee went over the plan. And I hope that we can get the board comfortable with the proposal, because the sooner the board approves the capital plan, the more timely I can be in initiating those engineering studies, the bid specifications, construction documents for those projects that we need to get aligned for July and August and September. So time sensitivity is important, maybe not as important as it was during the pandemic, where it was virtually impossible to get more than 2 bids. Sometimes you could only get 1 bid because everybody was so busy. Folks are still pretty busy, but not quite to the extent they have been. Okay, so here's our capital plan. And Kelly, I think both you and Eva were kind of asking about those industry standards and to what extent are we focused on energy efficiency and climate impact. So you see we have our table of contents here, which is basically identifying our school sites. And then I won't spend a lot of time with this overview here, but this articulates that we're very, very much aligned with the school board policy that is intentional around lowering our carbon footprint and being a sort of a leader in the climate mitigation concerns. You can see the projects that we have done are extensive in getting off fossil fuels in this region for our 10 school buildings. Essentially all buildings now that we have Oak Grove in the new plan, the fiscal year 25 plan is now scheduled for heat pump technology, so we will have none of our schools relying primarily on fossil fuels. We still do have them some of them have backup fuel, but that is the largest contributor to fossil fuels. I also mentioned I did want to talk about the EPA Clean Bus Initiative. It's not directly related to the capital plan because we're not making the upfront investment. It's through the partner who owns the buses, but I think that's another major contribution to lowering the carbon footprint and improving the air quality for students and our community. That policy cited here is policy E14 that I thought was very well crafted, and I'm very pleased to work with that in. The overview, so when the board feels they're ready, we will be looking for the motion to approve $6,239,340 in capital projects. You can see they're primarily still our heating and ventilation systems, and we've talked quite a bit about the need in Oak Grove, 1927 steam boiler system, and then another 1978 oil boiler system. So it's a kind of a hodgepodge of heating equipment that absolutely needs to be replaced. So that's the primary project. And then you see also the roofing systems. Eva, you were asking about that. You can see out of the 6.2 million, 1.6 million is roofing systems. And I think we all know if the roof starts to fail, all kinds of trouble develops very quickly. Air quality and mold and so on. It's just we can't defer those sorts of costs. So this summary is just providing the two types of presentation. One is infrastructure, what components of the building, and then the second part of this summary is what sites. It's the same 6 million. It's just what sites are we investing in. And you can see that because of the Oak Grove project and the maturing of the high school bond, this is a higher level of spending than we have had in prior years. But we still do have in the first 3 months of this fiscal year 25 ESSER funding that is helping to carry some of these costs. And that's down here, 300,000. The summary is a reference to our reserve balances. 4.8 million is what we ended up the year this June, and with $4 million in projects this current year that the board had authorized, and then raising the total sources, the 2.9 million. We're drawing down our reserve to 3.3 million is the projection for this year. For next year, the 3 million is in the budget that we just voted on. That is to help fund half of the 6.2 million in spending, and then another significant draw on the reserve to bring us down to 485,000. Still a favorable capital balance, but definitely the kind of the peak investment period, I think, in the next 10 years is this one, fiscal 25. Primarily, again, because the high school was finished in 2003. And now it's going to be 2025. So we're overdue in some of those areas, but we're right on schedule as long as we do move forward. A little more now on the detail level. So that summary simply aggregates all of the site proposals. For example, every building has to have a heating system with boilers and piping and distribution and control systems, air handling and so on, right? We need sprinkler systems, we need signaling systems, lighting, Every building needs all of these things: roofing, exterior walls, and then high school in particular needs athletic fields, and then we have our specialties, sometimes specific to a site. So, for example, the high school, you saw the summary number on the front page, but here's the detail on each project that between myself, Robert Clark, and then the individual facility manager at each site, we will manage the process that I outlined to Ruby's question. It is a lot of work, and it is time sensitive, and there are a lot of rules, a lot of procurement rules that we must follow. If we don't follow, then particularly if there's grant funding involved, the audit process will require us to pay it back. So we're very diligent about understanding the criteria of a grant, the reporting period, and all of the procurement requirements, which are things like the Davis-Bacon Act, where if we do the Oak Grove project, they have to pay their labor weekly, they have to report those, they have to comply with the county statistic on the announced minimum labor rates that is acceptable to the Davis-Bacon law, and so on. And we check that, and then we don't pay our contractor unless they show us the documentation, and then of course we are subject to an audit, and we have to demonstrate that. So as you can see, each project has a narrative in terms of the timing, the rationale, and if there are any contingencies that go with it. So it's a very well thought out plan that includes a timeline, and then if it has to be aligned with something, sequenced with another project, it's all in here. So that is the high school proposal. Here's the Oak Grove proposal. For example, we were just talking about Green Street. We can look at Green Street here. Academy, Green Street, hopefully it's green. What's this one? Green And you passed. Did I pass it? One page. Yep, there we go. One point it was green. I was looking for green. What is this called? Pink? I don't know. But for example, roofing systems is here, and you can see we have a series of investments in the roofing systems. And I do want to illustrate, this is a good illustration of where the capital plan is unlike the general fund. The general fund is very specific to a taxation source of funds in a specific period of time, right? So what we just discussed is July 24 through June 25. It creates funding for the $65 million, and that's it. There's no new funding after we do our budget. Capital fund is very different. It's fluid. It's cash in the bank. It's understood that oftentimes a vendor has to start work in June, which is the end of one fiscal year, and may not complete the work until the next fiscal year. So the money is combined over multiple years if needed. So you can see, for example, here, I'm not exactly sure when they'll finish the Green Street School that we just voted on, the roof. But you can see there's $325,000 between these two numbers. I suspect, we just did a bid award for $322,000, right? So we did pretty good on estimating the cost. But I can't predict when the vendor is actually going to be done, and I cut him the last check. So the capital plan is intended to be flexible as it relates to 6 months from now. We're going to have an estimate of cost, but I can't predict what the actual bids will be. We're pretty good at estimating them, but if they're different than our budget, then we have to flex. And that is the purpose of a reserve fund. It allows for that flexibility. So there's just an example of another school, but you will see the format of the report is all basically the same. All buildings have the same needs, and then at the end of the report, it shows the total for that building and the source of fund. Maybe one of our smaller schools here is Dummerston. Another overview for you, just in terms of format. Very important to us that when we replace an asset, we identify, you see the install date's 2021, and we project what is the useful life. Either this is like your question on the roof, well, we do this for every asset, and it's based on the manufacturer's assessment of their equipment. What is the useful life? That projects this number over here on the far right, 2041. Okay, so if we install an asset in 2021 and we think it's good for 20 years, I don't think I'll be around here in 2041, but somebody that's working with this plan would have the information they need to start planning for the investment for that asset. So even though there's no money in the current fiscal year, or in some instances there's no money in any of the years, like control system down here, it's still an important data piece for us. And that's what makes this really a 50-year plan. It's not really just a 5-year plan. So that's the format of the report. All of these projects have been carefully considered. And as I say, I can't say enough about our staff. Our principals are very connected to their buildings and to health and safe learning environments. They communicate a lot with our facility managers, and then I work with all of our facility managers and Robert Clark to develop this plan. We have created a reputation in the area where our vendors respect the way we do business. They know we're fair. We do always public bids. We are transparent, and we generally get good participation in our process.
Any questions on that?
Would it be appropriate at this time to make a motion on this capital?
If the board's willing to do that, it absolutely does help the district move forward, but there's still time if the board felt they needed another meeting. Last year we did go into, I think, February. But the earlier we can do it, the better it is for administration to begin the work that it takes to develop the project.
Well, I would make a motion that the WSESD approve the capital plan as outlined in the amount of $6,239,340.
Are there any questions, any discussion?
I just have I have a question and a statement. So I'm really excited about the electric buses. I remember you had talked about it at the beginning of the year. You kind of gave us like a little tidbit, and it's like, oh, I'd love to hear more about that. So I'm really excited that this is coming up. I feel like with our, we have a plan for a net zero plan, and also our energy. You talked about the Energy Excellence Award and how we try to do as much sustainable practices. And one thing I noticed is the language. One of the things when you're talking about reducing emissions, if you use language of positivity rather than like, we're going to reduce, we're going down by this amount, people tend to check out. But when you talk about making the building standards so that not only are they more energy efficient, it saves you money and also saves the environment. So then people go, okay, that's okay. Mm-hmm. So I see like you're doing a lot of that. And I think that our school, like my my belief is that our school can not only be number one in the state, but number one in the entire country. I feel like there's so much creativity and there's so many things that are just happening. I just see us being number one and like showing other schools in the country that a small rural school can do it. And if we can do it, a big city school can do it too. So that's just, I just wanted to say that out there. Like, I know that's like pie in the sky, but like, that's just my belief. And I wanted to talk about the buildings, like for heating. One of the things they talked about is that a lot of times with the heating is that you're heating the whole entire building and not focusing on like the areas that are used. And that is such a waste of energy. And I was wondering if there are discussions about how, if it's possible, you can like have the rooms that are being used, have that energy be in that room, and then let's say the total left side of that building be, at 60 degrees, but the room that we're using be at 68, something like that. Like, how is that? Are there conversations about how that energy is being used throughout the building?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what's so expensive about the going forward is the control systems. But the control systems are very sophisticated around isolating zones in the building and having sensors that turn things on and off automatically, whether there's someone in there or not, and then obviously sensing outside air temperatures, and then changing accordingly. The exciting thing about the growth project is the heat pump component of it also addresses humidity, which also really affects interior comfort and air quality. So that is absolutely part of the newer upgrades. The other thing that we've done, for example, recently at Academy and at Guilford, we've added cooling and condensing coils into the old unit ventilators so that we can be more specific with a particular room. And again, that's controlled specifically through a server and software that, whereas Kate, I don't think Kate does it, but she probably could if she wanted to change this room temperature right now. I know Rodney could.
I could, right.
You could too. All right.
It's Rodney's computer, but I could.
There we go. So it is happening, but it does take an investment to upgrade a lot of the older obsolete systems. So that is actually part of this thing.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, a motion has been made to approve the capital plan. All those in favor of approving the capital plan, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay.
So I understand you want to take a break, and then I could literally cover that in 2 minutes, but if you wanted to know more, I could go as long as you want. The clean EPS side.
Why don't we take the break, because if people have questions, I think people will probably have questions, and I want to make sure that they have an opportunity for that. Okay. So we will take a break. It is now 8:09. We are going to take a break till 8:20. I'm giving 11 minutes. That's a bonus.
He's been doing it.
It is 8:20 and we are back. Thank you everyone for your patience. I hope you had a nice break. And we move back to Frank to talk about the clean house.
Very good. Okay. I will do another share screen. And we can make this very brief if folks don't have questions, but if we do have questions, glad to discuss as much as we would like. So what I'm sharing here, you have the handout. Just recently I received the EPA Clean Bus Program application with our current partner, Beacon Mobility. This brochure outlines a very broad brush process. The objective here is to acquire electric buses and replace our diesel fleet that, of course, we do not own, but we contract for. So the EPA announced the program in September. I went right to work with Green Mountain Power in October and reviewed our concept. They are very excited to work with us. They have an incentive program. They did come to our site. And when I say our site, it's where Kosmuskas, which is now Beacon Mobility, has a depot on Putney Mountain Road. It's been there for many, many years. Green Mountain Power is assessing the site for its capacity to develop the infrastructure to charge buses. So that's quite a process. I started that in October and finished that recently. It is a viable site, so that allowed us to move forward to the next step, which is to apply for the EPA grant. It's $395,000 per bus. We need 18 buses. And here's the next process. You can see our partner here is very specific. Got to go to the school board, and we need to review a couple of documents. So that's what we'll do right now. Because as a federal program, they want to be assured that the governing body is fully behind the project. And if the governing body is, then I can apply. Deadline's January 31st, so it's coming right up. A couple more documents here help you understand the nature of this program. Essentially, Beacon Mobility would own the buses. We don't want to own buses. We don't operate buses. We don't want to build a depot. We don't want to have mechanics fix buses, right? We want somebody else to do that that's a specialist. So this is the gist of this Q&A. You know, who owns the buses? Well, Beacon Mobility owns the buses. And then, of course, we are obligated to do the due diligence to make sure we can charge them and operate. So that's the gist of all of this Q&A. Here's the memorandum of understanding. If you authorize Kelly to sign this, then I can move forward. This is the memorandum of understanding. Essentially, it says a whole lot of things different ways, but it's, again, Beacon Mobility will submit an application on our behalf. If we're selected, they'll own the buses, and then we will work through a contract process. I would expect it would be a bid process that would determine how we would engage them, as we have for the last 6 years, to provide transportation for our students using electric buses. There are provisions in here that says, oh, if we decide we don't want to do business together, they're still going to own the buses, but we would structure any kind of a contract with Beacon Mobility so that we're only paying for the services that we consume. Or another way to say it is this memorandum of understanding makes it clear that we're not upfronting any costs. If the EPA says we are a viable entity, then we essentially are qualifying them to access the $395,000 per bus. We can't do that on our own because you have to have a diesel bus to get rid of in order and to be replaced with a electric bus, and that's not our business. So that's the gist of this document. I've had extensive conversations with Beacon Mobility folks. Van Pool Transportation is actually the operating company. They use Beacon Mobility as their holding company name. That's a common convention. But we've been doing business with Beacon Mobility, who actually is also called Van Pool Transportation, for the past 6 years. They've They performed very well, and I would say better than our prior vendor, who we had for 25 years, I guess.
Without a doubt.
Yes.
Much better.
So we're confident that this is in the district's best interest, and it absolutely is good for kids. It's good for community, this does not really obligate us. The MOU says that this, by applying, all it is doing is saying the board is aware that the district is applying to access federal money and be considered in the application process. The award is actually not until April, so we won't know if we're actually picked or not. The second document is just a single page, looking for, again, Kelly's signature. And it is saying, hey, you're dealing with a third party, which is this Beacon Mobility Van Pool. So there are 2 documents to sign. If the board's comfortable with moving forward with this tonight, great. I can move forward with the application if the board wants to think about it more. You have another meeting on the 30th, and we could, take the action then, and I can apply the next day. So
My concern is that it's not on the agenda, and if we're taking action, I'm concerned that but we can put it on so that we can put it on next week's meeting, and so if everyone can be prepared to respond to that next meeting.
it's fine, yeah, that's what I anticipate.
It appears from this proposal that there's very little liability exposure that the district would incur. It seems like something definitely it'd be like being able to apply for the grant and then see where we go.
Right, yeah, this enables us to apply if the board doesn't authorize to move forward and essentially sign the 2 documents, then yeah, I can't apply. So that's the nature of it.
Okay, we'll make sure that it's on, get them on to put it on next week.
Very good, that's great, yeah.
Anything else budget related
That's all I had.
Okay, so we'll move on to the clerk's report. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of July 9, 2024?
So moved.
Thank you, Sean. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of July 9, 2024, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Can I make a comment, Kelly?
Sure.
I would just like to say that they were the final Wendy minutes, and I would just like to say publicly that the service that she has given this district is remarkable, and I would like to extend a thank to her. Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that, Sean. And if Mark would please, I'm sure that at some point we'll be reaching out to him if we could extend the board's thanks. So now we'll move on to public comment on non-agenda items. We did, as is appropriate, put a little more time towards the budget, because that was really one of the necessaries for this evening. So we are going to try to make it up through the rest of the budget, that's on my mind, through the rest of the agenda, sorry. But we do have 10 minutes for public comment on non-agenda items. Anyone making a comment can expect a response that falls into one of the following categories: receive an acknowledgement of the comment with no further action planned, receive an immediate response by the board chair or administration. Administration will be directed to contact and respond to the person. Clarification sought from the administration for a specified meeting. The topic would be added to a specified future board agenda. The matter would be referred to an executive session, or a public hearing would be held on the matter. Is there anyone who, it looks like Jody, you have your hand up.
Yeah, me again. This is something that is my personal philosophy. I've been watching the board and listening, and it seems to me that there have been a few retreats lately. There's been a school board retreat, a VSBA retreat, an administrative and board, I think, combination retreat, and an admin retreat. I have nothing against retreats. However, my personal philosophy is all the money that we're voting should go to the kids, to the students. And I would like to see in future budgets, and I don't know, I'm not able to find the costs of these. I have talked to Sean, and he's given me some information about the school board's retreat, which doesn't seem to be very expensive. But other than having this money go to the students, I'm thinking anything that can be accomplished somewhere else other than locally shouldn't happen. I think for two reasons. I think for budgetary reasons, monetary reasons, anything should happen locally and be very inexpensive. The other thing is, I think we should be supporting our local economy and not somebody else's local economy. So I would like the board to take into consideration, and I'd like the administration to take into consideration any future retreats as far as their financial, whatever financial effect that it'll have on it. And I also would like to, and I think maybe Sean or maybe Frank would let me know exactly how much these retreats that have happened in the last year cost overall, all of the cost of them, each one of them. So thank you. And I don't think I have anything else to say tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jody.
I would just like to support what Jody said. I completely agree that we should watch retreat budgets and whenever possible have retreats local for the reasons she stated. So I want to thank Jody for making those comments.
Sean?
I think I forwarded Jody this document, and this was a document, I don't know exactly what it covers, but it amounts to just under $26,000 have been expended.
For what?
For these retreats.
For all of them?
Yeah, retreats that were just distributed by Kelly through Mo. Yeah, so just shy of 26,000.
Yeah. I don't want to get into it tonight because we still have a lot on the agenda, so maybe a future board meeting, but I will just say there's a lot of value in going on a retreat. It's focused on professional development. It's focused on professionalism, focused on setting goals for achievement to move our school system forward. And sometimes it is necessary to do things locally in Vermont, but outside of southern Vermont, because there are distractions with family and other responsibilities. But happy to talk about this further at a future meeting.
Any other comments? Public comment, non-agenda items? Anyone else? One more time, public comment, non-agenda items, and we are moving on. So new business, policy and amendment committee?
Policy and Amendment Committee presents for a 10-day reading period G8 continuous improvement plan. So there are lots of edits online. If you go to the agenda of tonight and click on G8, you will see what we are presenting for a 10-day reading period, G8. We talk a lot about continuous improvement plan, and this certainly establishes the collaborative working relationship between administration and the school board.
Okay, not seeing anything. I guess we will move on to unfinished business.
Are you speaking? We can't hear you.
Not yet. The board engaged Amy Goddard, Esquire, to conduct a privileged and confidential investigation. Attorney Goddard analyzed allegations of sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and retaliation. Attorney Goddard has made confidential factual findings. The board has relied on Attorney Goddard's findings and other information to improve district policies and practices, and to take other action necessary to protect students, employees, and other members of the educational community. While we anticipate that this statement may be a disappointment to some, we do not expect to make any further comment on the investigation. Thank you to those of you who participated in the investigation. Mark, as superintendent, what would you like to add?
Nothing specifically about the statement, but just say that recognize that the board has been steadfast and committed to this investigation and working with the administration to establish very clear protocols, trainings. We've presented a number of times at school board meetings some developments that we've been able to improve as a school system around Act 1 training, in reporting abuse, notices in newsletters, notices in former robo email updates, postings on the website, regular discussions at board meetings. There's been ongoing improved implementation of restorative practices at schools, ongoing implementation of HHB, bullying, policy development and professional development, more clarity around Title IX coordinator, very clear policy on abuse prevention in HHB policies. Those improvements and developments have been a major commitment of this board in supporting the admin team and developing improvement in those areas, and it doesn't stop. It's, as we've talked about at multiple meetings, this is a continuous professional development, continuous improvement, and we will continue to regularly update the board and the community on our trauma-informed practices and implementation of Act 1 and all future collaboration with each other as an admin team, with the board as a support system, and to the community to provide clarity of how to communicate and be very transparent in the professional development that we interact in every summer, every fall, and how we come back to it routinely through the school year. So committed to continuing to report out on developing work and how we're improving our professional development. And the board's guidance has led to a lot of this work in terms of increasing our focus and the importance of being transparent about how our systems run and operate in our schools.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone who would like to make a comment or question? Martha Carroll, I saw your hand first.
Good evening. I just wanted to add, I think it's an injustice to survivors to not release further information. The community needs accountability to heal, and I think this leaves people feeling alone. And so it's a disappointing outcome, and I think it's allowing secrecy and injustice to continue.
Thank you for your comment. Mindy?
So I'm speaking not only as the person who wrote the article of 2021, but also as somebody who helped multiple people connect with your quote unquote independent investigator. And this is an incredible deception to entice people to come to you and speak to your investigator about harms they suffered in your schools with promises, ongoing, constant promises of transparency. And to do this is an incredible deception. I want to say that, first of all, you have not met the demands set forth in the letter of September 2022 that was signed by 188 community members that insisted that you engage a neutral outside party to investigate. Instead, you hired a private attorney to conduct, as you say, a privileged investigation. And you refuse to even be forthcoming about things like the burden of proof you would be applying to these reports, and about the numbers of people who had reported or the numbers of educators who had been named. And furthermore, you haven't even met the obligation set forth or the commitment set forth in your own statement of December 10th, 2022, in which you promised transparency again, in which you promised to work with law enforcement as the reports came in. When I asked Kelly Young whether the board had, when I asked the board whether the board had fulfilled its commitments, its mandated reporting obligations, she responded that your lawyer would tell you if you had to do something. But there is nothing in Vermont mandated reporting law that says a mandated reporter should first consult a lawyer before making a report. It is outrageous to me. And second of all, you said that you would consult with law enforcement to determine what information from this report would be released. And yet the only people who have been in your executive sessions have been your lawyers, Kendall Hoax, and the last one, Kendall Hoax, and attorney Pietro Lynn. That's not law enforcement. That's protecting your own liability. That's not protecting anybody in the community.
I'm going to interrupt because I've really tried to understand, to hear what you're saying, and you're sounding very echoey, and I'm not sure if you would like to restate concisely what it is you're saying, because I'm having a real difficult time understanding what it is you're saying.
I think I am being concise.
No,
there's a lot to say.
It's not.
Can you hear me?
I mean,
Muffled.
it's very difficult to understand what it is you're.
It's muffled.
It's muffled.
It's muffled.
Okay.
So let's just give it a moment to see.
Is that better?
No.
Can you hear me better?
It's better when you're closer to the screen, Mindy.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Is it clear? Is it echoey? Is it muffled?
It's pretty muffled.
I'm going to turn off my camera. Is that better?
A little bit.
Can you hear me better?
A little bit.
Okay.
Speak loudly, please.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is it better if I?
It is better, yes.
Okay. I'm going to speak as loudly and clearly as I can.
Thank you.
I said that it is an incredible deception to entice people to come to your quote unquote independent investigator. She's clearly not an independent investigator. As you said, it was a privileged investigation conducted by a private attorney. To entice people to come to your investigator and reveal stories of harm they suffered in your district schools with promises of transparency, constant promises of transparency and action and justice, and do this. This is an incredible deception. I want to say, first of all, that you have not met the demands made in the letter the community signed in September of 2022. 188 people signed a letter insisting that you engage a neutral outside party to conduct an investigation. You hired a private attorney and to conduct a privileged investigation. And the community also demanded transparency and a release of the results of the findings of the report. That has not happened. But furthermore, you also have not met the commitments set forth in your own statement of December 2022, in which you promised, for example, you promised transparency again, and Mark Spino keeps saying the word transparency, and I worry that your educators aren't really going to understand or be able to teach kids what that word means, because this is not transparency. You promised that you would work with law enforcement as the results came in, and yet when I asked Kelly Young about whether or not, I asked the whole board whether the board has met its obligations for mandated reporting of names that have been brought to them for alleged child abuse, Kelly Young told me that your lawyer would tell you if you had to do anything. But there is not anything in Vermont law that stipulates that a mandated reporter should consult a lawyer before making a report. And you also promised to release the results of this investigation in consultation with law enforcement, and yet you have not invited any law enforcement into your executive sessions. You've only invited the board's own lawyers, Kendall Hoax and Pietro Lynn. So clearly you have not fulfilled that commitment unless there's been some notice or consultation with law enforcement that happened outside of public meeting or executive session. I want to say also that, let me see. In terms of your investigation, you refused to release even basic information to the public about the burden of proof you would be using. I don't know if you heard that the first time or if I've already repeated that. And you refused to give even basic information about the numbers of people who had come forward or the numbers of educators who had been named. This is just another incident of betrayal, of institutional betrayal of the people who have already been harmed in your schools. I find it outrageous and incredibly disappointing that individuals I respect and like would fall into this pattern of institutional behavior once they join the board. You know, I'm not going to say more about that, but this is the board acting to cover up what happened in your schools once again. This is just another cover up of what happened, and it's a huge betrayal to survivors and to people who were harmed in your schools. And it's not a service to the community when there are still people who have been named by a number of former students as guilty or alleged to have committed acts of sexual misconduct, and they're still in your community and still engaging with children in your community because nobody knows that these things have been alleged. This is a betrayal of everybody.
Thank you for your comment. I will encourage anyone who has information about a current teacher, administrator, custodian, anyone who is currently in the school system to please reach out to the superintendent, because that would be the appropriate venue for that to go to. Those circumstances for current employees would not come to the board. So I encourage you, if there are current employees, that anyone is aware that there's anything that needs to be, or they feel needs to be addressed, they can certainly reach out to law enforcement or they can reach out to the superintendent. Thank you. Sherry,
could I add one more thing? Which is that Justice Law Collaborative is representing people who have been harmed in your schools, and survivors should be aware that that's also an option for them if they do not feel served by this process.
Mark, did you understand what you just said? Okay, thank you very much. Mark Spino, as the superintendent, has heard what you said, and I believe he is marking that down. Thank you. Sherry?
Can you hear me?
We can, yes, thank you.
This is incredibly outrageous. You have not addressed the harm that was done to survivors. And you are continuing to cause additional harm through this process by not releasing the information. You have spent $135,000, perhaps more, in public monies, yet refuse to release this information. I don't know how you could say that this was an impartial investigation when this is the outcome. This is just beyond belief.
Thank you. I will refer anyone who has any questions, comments, concerns to the information that Mark Spino shared about the the ways that the school district is working towards improving this matter, improving ways that the students are being served, are being cared for, the security of the students are being addressed. So I would encourage anyone to listen to BCTV afterwards when the audio comes out, and they can review the items, the many items that Mark has listed off that the superintendent and the administration has enacted, the professional development, all the ways that they're things that they're doing, the actions they're taking to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
So
Sherry?
Just add to that, Kelly. Over the past couple of years, we've given a couple of presentations on professional development and increasing awareness. Those presentations are posted on the website underneath reports to the board.
Thank you. Sherry, very quickly before we move on.
That is no consolation to those who have already been harmed. None at all. And every single one of these kids who were abused in your schools were one of your kids that you were responsible for, no less than the students who are in the schools today. And you still have a responsibility to them. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to move on to the continuation of food accessibility at district schools. To be honest, I'm not sure if that stayed on the agenda from the last time and if it was intended to, but I do believe that there has been some communication in regards to that maybe might be, Tim, did you want to, you had some communication with?
Yeah, just that Susan Grabowski has wrote to me and asked when we would like to report. She's asking to for the end of February, possibly. And she's also asking for specific questions that we have about food accessibility.
If I could also, I work with Susan on the food program, and this is a good time to just revisit the annual cycle of review for food services. So Susan right now is in the middle of the monitoring each building, each site. She has basically a checklist that's required as part of the USDA kind of a quality assurance. So she'll be developing that report. It's something that would be fine to share as well. I think it probably aligns with what you were just referring to, Tim. That monitoring is also required to be reported to the agency by February 1st. And just sort of as an aside, she did indicate that we have been sustaining the improvements that we talked about a couple of meetings ago, and particularly at the high school. So that's favorable. Recyclers, thank you. And so the other component of that is typically, of course, this is all administered through the supervisory union board, but obviously shared with this board and Vernon board as well. But we would be looking for the AOE and the child nutrition program's response to those monitoring reports in March or April. And then we would be back having this discussion with the board on renewal or not. It's a 5-year contract, but every year we consider whether or not to renew. So just as a sort of a follow-up to that, it is absolutely part of the usual process of reviewing food service performance. We also thought it would be appropriate to have Chris Barrow, he's the representative from Fresh Picks, join a board meeting. He often does that to answer questions and represent the process.
Maybe Wednesdays. Maybe at a future upcoming board.
Yeah, we'll know a lot more in terms of the monitoring results and then the AOE feedback in March. So, February or March would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly?
Yes.
I just wanted to remind the board, one of the things we talked about at the last meeting was the Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee is going to be focusing on this. And so I think it's good that we're engaging with Susan, but we're also coming at her from different angles or multiple points. And so I would just encourage us to kind of consolidate our conversations in the Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee. We had a meeting earlier today, which is really just kind of a kickoff moment of kind of like, well, what are we going to do now? Because this is not something that's going to, this is a conversation, not the stuff that Frank just talked about the actual contract is like not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just overall, how is food equity in our district from school to school. So anyway, I just wanted to remind everyone that is a focus, and we do meet monthly. That's our intention.
If I could add to that, it is, I appreciate you mentioning the communication kind of sequence. It is really helpful if the board communicates, through the chair to Mark, and then Mark sends it around to Susan or me or whomever, just for that reason. If individual board members are asking for specific information, I know it was confusing to Susan. Who am I? What's the direction? How do I coordinate? Am I doing the right thing? And your board code of conduct says that you will communicate through Mark with employees, and it is helpful to stay on that standard.
I think that's an important point for all of us to remember, that if we have concerns or questions for any administrator, including the superintendent, that all communication, this is my understanding, all communication from board members goes to the board chair, for the board chair to then funnel it and then pass it on. And that includes any communication to our legal teams, because every time we reach out to them individually, there's a clock ticking and money is being spent. So it needs really to be consolidated through the board chair. And it's just a reminder for all of us to do that, which we're not doing.
I think these are points very well taken. And being on the Social Justice Committee, we should straighten out which committee handles it for your Programmatic Equity Committee taking it. But Social Justice should discuss it, because it involves both visions of both committees. But regardless, everything should go through the chair.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Okay, so if we are done with the food portion, we will move on back to the Policy and Amendment Committee.
So on behalf of Policy and Amendment, I move that the SD Board adopt for readoption D7, volunteers and work study students.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. So D7, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving D7 volunteers and work study students, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions?
Aye.
Okay.
And moving on, again, I move on behalf of Policy and Amendment that,
Wasn't that an extension? There was an extension?
No,
It was an I.
it was an I, it was a
Sorry.
silly. Yeah. I've been there trying to get there to get unmuted and then by the time.
so again,
I was
I
having
move,
coughing fits.
so again, I move on the policy, on behalf of policy and amendment, that the board readopt F36, student freedom of expression in school-sponsored media.
Is there any discussion about F36, student freedom of expression in school-sponsored media? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving F36, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. So now we will move on to board matters training. And the first thing is Leadership Council updates. Do we have any? Okay.
I can share a survey has gone out, which we talked about at the orientations. Ruby has kindly put together a survey. Mo has sent that out to the various LCs, and once we collect that feedback, we can bring it to the board.
Okay. Any other LC? So we will move on to board subcommittees. There's actually Social Justice Committee. I think that we may have 2 items.
Okay. Yeah, the Social Justice Committee has been discussing the situation in Gaza and Israel. And we have a statement that we're proposing the board approve. But before I go on, Robin, I think would you like to describe the process that got us this far?
Sure. So the purpose of that we wanted to achieve was to make sure that our teachers feel supported in teaching on this topic, as it's been a really contentious climate in the education world. And so we drafted a statement to discuss with the administration. So we had a meeting with Mark Spino, and our HR director, Mike Kelleher, also attended and gave feedback to find the best language that would make teachers feel supported. And then I believe Mark then showed the draft for feedback to the union and the other administrators and also some staff members. And we got a little bit more feedback on it. So this is really a collaborative effort by the schools and the board to let everyone know that we are in support of teachers educating on what's going on in our world, even when there's really highly controversial and contentious topics, such as this one. So do you guys want to read the statement?
Well, we can't take action on this. It wasn't. There's no action warned, possible action warned. We can't vote on it.
Then if we can't vote on it.
We can vote on it next week, though.
If we can vote on it next week, I propose that we just read it now and then vote next week to give a week of deliberation.
I think that'd be fine.
That's up to the board. I mean, are board members comfortable reading the statement this evening, or did you?
I mean, I think that the statement is part of the work product of our committee update. So I think that this reading it is perfectly appropriate under the committee updates, which is this portion of the agenda. If folks want to wait to vote on it until it's warned as its own topic, we can do that on next Tuesday.
Okay. So when I send out the email, oh, I won't send out an email. I'll make a note of it. I'll make a note to have it agenda.
So then there are 2 amendments to the warning that's out for the
Yes.
130.
One is the
having to do with the bus.
Yep.
Right, having to do with the
And-
bus, and the other is
yes. Okay.
putting this on the agenda for a board vote. Does that make sense? Right.
Okay. I'm handing it back to you, Tim.
Okay, so we read it.
If the.
Okay, this is the,
Sorry, before we begin, just because, could we just get a couple words from Mark about the meeting and how that went?
Yeah, it was, I thought it was a really productive meeting. Social justice committee members came to the meeting with a draft statement, which was super helpful. We read through the statement together. It's a collaborative process. Shared some edits, talked through the meanings of those edits. We're really thinking about supporting the teachers in all aspects of developing the statement. And then having the opportunity to share with administrators who were then able to share with their staff. And then also the association and getting feedback that was also included in the statement. Just felt like a really good process to include many voices.
thank you, Mark. So for Matt and others who don't have a copy of the statement, I'll read it. The events that have unfolded in Israel and Gaza since October 7, 2023 have been heartbreaking to witness. We are acutely mindful of the horrors described by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres as, quote, appalling human suffering, physical destruction, and collective trauma across Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory, close quote. That's from UN News, December 22nd, 2023. This is just one of many violent conflicts going on around the world. As our young people view these images and stories on television or the internet, they need the support of caregivers and teachers to make sense of these events and process their emotions. This can be especially difficult for children who have lived through war and conflict or who have connections to the region. The recent increase in Islamophobic and anti-Semitic hate crimes in this country adds even more urgency to the need for education around these issues. Across the nation, teachers and administrators struggle with how to tackle this sensitive, hot-button matter with their students. Many may fear backlash or reprisals for even raising the topic or for presenting basic information about the horrific tragedy that continues to unfold. Our school district is committed to creating intentional learning spaces that allow our students to grow into critical thinkers. The board and the administration of the Windham Southeast School District offer our support to those administrators and teaching staff who choose to discuss Palestine and Israel or any other conflicts with their students in age-appropriate ways, explore the historical contexts that have led to this crisis, and imbue our students with a sense of shared humanity with people across the globe. The Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice is well prepared to provide educators with resources to help learn about and facilitate these conversations, and to support the collaboration of our teaching staff who would like to work together to develop appropriate resources and materials.
I agree with, I feel like we definitely don't get taught enough about this in school. Like, I mean, I don't use my phone, so when I only hear about this is when the news is playing, but then I'm barely at home because of school. So, and then when I go to school, nobody's talking about it. And it's very important, especially because we have some students that, you know, came to like our school to like come get an education and be like away from that danger. And you know, I've noticed that there's a lot of biases in our schools when we see these other students, and it's just like, we are part of the same community, like, and it builds this like toxic, like unhealthy foundation. And also like, something that I want, sorry, I gotta take my coat off, it's getting hot in here. And something that I've learned is that frequent social media users experience the same amount of trauma as a pre-social media person's lifetime. So let's say somebody from like 5 decades ago, like their trauma that they experienced in their lifetime, an average social media user experiences that in just 1 day. And so, well, that's what I've learned from this. But I can try to find the like information if y'all really crave it. But and that is just a plant's fear, which causes a result of like chaotic environment, anxious environment, people making decisions and actions and like kind of like communicating with people and like not out of love, not out of care or open-mindedness, and it's not healthy for our environment. And for when we do process these things from whether it's like Instagram, the news, or like, you know, like stories that we hear, like, cause you know, like people like always, people are so obsessed with drama and trauma that they turn it into like this entertaining thing that they use to like start conversations with people. And it's actually like, it's like, they're like unconsciously like poisoning their minds and their flows and the vibrations that they're sending out. And so when we do learn these things, I think it's important that in school, instead of just adding more onto this like adding more pressure onto this individuals, that we like provide like it's a mindful time. One of my teachers does it. She like lets us like do whatever we need to like reset. Whether some people is that go on the phone, go for a walk, get some snack, or like do yoga, whatever it is that's best for them. And not just like do this, because there's a lot going on in this world right now, as you can tell by the way I'm speaking. And yeah, I do feel like it's really, really important that this is still being taught though, because although we live in such a stressed out culture, I feel like we need to find a way to balance it with like, I don't know, like peace, just like relaxation, but also like we need to educate one another because this is like so important. Yeah. Just like that.
Okay, so we'll put this on the agenda and then we will thank you. I want to thank Tim and Eva and Robin and Ruby. You were involved with this as well. So I want to thank you all. This is, you all took this on, and Mark and any of the members of the administration who worked on this, and it's a very sensitive issue. And thank you very much for addressing it in a sensitive way. So, thank you.
I don't know why I look at the screen instead of
Can you email this to all board members?
Yes.
Would you please?
Yes.
So that, because not everyone is here, and it would be helpful if we could have this online as well as board members.
I'll send it out right now, Deborah.
Oh, thank you, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
I don't think so. Is there anything else for social justice?
Okay.
Is there anything else?
Oh, yeah. The next social justice committee, I understand, we're going to discuss an ongoing problem with bullying and racial slurs. All subcommittees are open to the public, to parents, guardians, teachers, to everybody. I personally hope that people can engage in the discussion on bullying and racial slurs at the next social justice meeting. It's important.
And that next social justice meeting is the first Thursday of the month at 10 o'clock via Zoom. So that means it is on February 1st at 10 a.m.
Thank you.
Were there any other, we do have an executive session that we need to jump into shortly. Were there any other committees that, anyone, Sean?
Well, I would just like to give a shout out to the Finance Committee, everybody that's on that, and Frank Rucker and the administrators. Tonight's kind of a watershed, having passed the proposed budget, and it's a long process, and we have to. I would like to extend my thank you to Frank Rucker for the incredible work that he's done and continues to do. So,
And thank you, Frank, of course. And thank you, Sean, for bringing that to the forefront. And being on the Finance Committee and all the Finance Committee on all those. And the Budget Review Committee. Thank you, Budget Review Committee, for all the work that you've done. I know that's all volunteers as well. So.
I think when one speaks about the Budget Review Committee, it's very important to remember the word independent.
Yes.
And that really represents community members, and it's a committee made up of 4 people from each one of the 4 towns in the district, and their dedication and time should also be commended.
I also wanted to say, when there's appreciation being expressed, I always need to acknowledge the team at central office and our principals and our partners. It's absolutely a team effort to get to this point where we're looking at the needs of our students and how we can move forward.
I'm actually in the wrong spot with all of these accolades, so thank you very much to Finance. Policy Committee has shifted its meeting time, and I just want this publicly on the record. We are now meeting the 2nd and the 4th Wednesday of every month from 2 to 4. So there's been a change from the Tuesday to the Wednesday. Okay, thanks.
Okay, if there's nothing else on committees, I will ask if there is a motion to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage, with the expectation that there will be a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A4, a disciplinary or dismissal action against a public officer or employee. So with that reference, is there a motion to find that premature general public knowledge will clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage? Thank you, Deborah. Okay, all those in favor of that finding, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Aye. Okay. So then, is there a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A4, a disciplinary or dismissal action against a public officer or employee, and inviting in Mark Spino and Mike Kelleher?
Yes.
Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Kim. All those in favor of the motion to go into executive session as indicated, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. And actually, Mark, will there be action? Will we need to take action?
Yes.
Okay, and there will be action taken, so If CCTV wants to hang around, that would be appreciated. Okay, wonderful. We are back from executive session at 9:41. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation of Mark Spino?
So moved.
Thank you, Sean. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the recommendation of Superintendent Mark Spino, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Okay, so then I will ask if there is the last motion of the evening.
Madam Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Thank you very much, Anne. All those, is there any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning for the evening, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you very much. We are adjourned at 9:42. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you, anyone else who is on Zoom. Have a great evening, and if you're traveling, please be safe.